The day my father brought a stranger into my backyard without asking, I realized my family had been making plans that didn't include me. Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of how my own father tried to take the home I worked years to build, all in the name of family. If you enjoy real-life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. I bought my house 5 years ago, fresh out of a divorce that left me emotionally numb and financially terrified. It wasn't a dream home by any magazine standard. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, beige siding that desperately needed power washing. But it was mine. Every inch of it, especially the backyard. The yard was what sold me. It wasn't perfect. The grass grew unevenly, and the fence leaned slightly to the left. But it felt open, safe, a place where nothing was expected of me except to breathe. I planted roses along the fence my first summer there. I remember kneeling in the dirt, hands shaking, thinking that if I could keep these plants alive, maybe I could keep myself together too. I worked long hours as a project coordinator for a construction firm in Columbus, Ohio. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. I saved aggressively, said no to vacations, and learned how to fix small things around the house myself because hiring help felt like weakness I couldn't afford. My family praised me for being independent, but I'd learned that word came with strings attached. My older sister Rachel had twins 3 years after I bought the house. Boys, loud, energetic, always sticky. I loved them, I really did. But from the moment they were born, my family's center of gravity shifted entirely toward her. Rachel needed help. Rachel was overwhelmed. Rachel deserved support. And somehow that support always came at the cost of my boundaries. Still, nothing prepared me for what happened that Saturday morning. I had just returned from the grocery store, arms full of bags, when I noticed my dad's pickup truck parked crookedly near my mailbox. That alone wasn't unusual. He stopped by unannounced often enough to make me uneasy, but I'd learned not to challenge it. What made my stomach tighten was the unfamiliar sedan parked behind him. I dropped the groceries inside and walked around to the backyard. Dad was standing near the fence, hands on his hips, talking animatedly to a man in a blazer who held a clipboard. The stranger was nodding, occasionally glancing down at the grass like it was a spreadsheet. "This is a generous lot," the man said. "Especially for this neighborhood." I froze. "What's going on?" Dad turned, smiling like this was a pleasant surprise. "Emily, good timing." The stranger stuck out his hand. "Mark, I'm a realtor." I didn't take his hand. "Why is there a realtor in my backyard?" Dad sighed, already impatient. "Stop being selfish. Your sister's twins need a bigger yard." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they were said so casually, like the decision had already been made. "You brought him here without telling me," I said slowly. Dad waved a dismissive hand. "We're just exploring options." "Options for what?" My voice cracked. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "I was told the homeowner was aware of the walkthrough." "I am the homeowner," I said. "And I wasn't aware of anything," Dad frowned. "Let's not get stuck on technicalities." That sentence had followed me my entire life. Whenever Rachel needed money, attention, or exceptions, technicalities were brushed aside. My needs were always negotiable. "This isn't a discussion," I said. "You need to leave." Dad's expression hardened. "You're overreacting. You live alone. Rachel has 2 kids. And that gives you the right to sell my house." "No one said sell," he snapped. "You could downsize." "Help your family." Help. That word again. Mark cleared his throat. "I think I should go." He walked past me, avoiding eye contact, muttering an apology I barely heard. When the gate clicked shut behind him, the backyard felt suddenly smaller. Dad crossed his arms. "I thought you'd be more reasonable." I looked at the roses along the fence, freshly blooming, and felt something inside me snap. I didn't know it then, but that moment would define everything that followed. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father standing in my backyard like he owned it. Like my work, my payments, my sacrifices were just temporary obstacles in a plan he'd already approved. By morning, the anger settled into something heavier: disappointment. Dad showed up again 2 days later, this time knocking instead of letting himself in. I opened the door but didn't invite him inside. He stood there holding a paper bag from the bakery down the street, the one we used to visit on Sundays when I was a kid. I brought pastries, he said, as if sugar could undo betrayal. Say what you need to say, I replied. He exhaled and stepped inside anyway. Old habits die hard. Dad sat at my kitchen table like he always had, elbows spread, claiming space. He glanced around, eyes lingering on the new light fixture I'd installed myself last winter. You've done well here, he admitted. But Rachel is drowning. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. That doesn't make my house available. She's raising twins alone, he said. You know how expensive that is. So is buying a home, I shot back. He frowned, clearly unprepared for resistance. When you were younger, you were always the easy one. There it was. The truth he never meant to say out loud. I wasn't easy, I said quietly. I was ignored, Dad stiffened. That's not fair. When Mom died, she left Rachel the savings account, I continued. You told me it was because Rachel needed it more. I didn't argue. That was different. It always is. He rubbed his forehead like I was giving him a headache. You don't even want kids. The sentence landed like an accusation. No, I said evenly. But I wanted a life. Silence stretched between us. Then he stood. You're letting pride get in the way of family. After he left, my phone buzzed. Rachel. Her voice was tight when I answered. Dad said you humiliated him. You knew about the Realtor, I said. She didn't deny it. I thought you'd be more understanding, she replied. I thought you'd ask me. She sighed dramatically. Emily, the twins barely have room to play. Your yard is just sitting there, being used, I snapped. By me. You're being selfish. Hearing the same word from both of them hurt more than I expected. That night changed everything. The calls didn't stop after that. Dad, Rachel, even my aunt chimed in, leaving voicemails about family duty and sacrifice. Each message chipped away at something inside me, but instead of folding, I hardened. A week later, a letter arrived. Not handwritten, official, from a law office. It claimed there was a family interest in the property, suggesting mediation before further steps. My hands shook as I read it. They weren't just pressuring me anymore. They were threatening me. I called the number immediately. That's how I met Janice Miller, the attorney who would change my life. She listened quietly as I explained everything, occasionally asking questions that cut through the emotional fog. Did anyone co-sign your mortgage? She asked. No. Any shared funds? No. Then they have no claim, she said simply. Hearing that felt like oxygen. We scheduled a mediation session. Dad agreed immediately. Rachel too. Their confidence made my stomach churn. The day of mediation, Dad sat across from me with the same expression he wore when I was 12 and in trouble. Rachel sat beside him, arms wrapped around herself, eyes glossy like she was the victim. Janice sat calmly at my side, flipping through documents. Dad spoke first. This shouldn't be necessary, Janice smiled politely. Then it will be quick. He argued family obligation, sacrifice, fairness. Janice responded with facts. There is no shared ownership, she said. Emily purchased this property independently. There is no legal basis for this claim, Rachel's voice cracked. You don't understand what it's like having kids. I met her gaze. You don't understand what it's like being treated like you don't matter. The mediator ended the session within 20 minutes. Dad stood abruptly. You've changed. Yes, I said. I have. For the first time in my life, I didn't apologize. As I walked out of that building, sunlight hit my face, and I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. I didn't know it then, but standing my ground had shifted everything permanently. After the mediation ended, the silence from my family was immediate and deliberate. No calls, no texts, no passive-aggressive check-ins disguised as concern. It felt less like peace and more like punishment, as if withholding themselves was meant to teach me a lesson. At first, I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt strangely calm. The days settled into a routine. Work, home, quiet evenings in my backyard. I watered the roses more than necessary, using the repetition to think. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next request. No one was asking me to bend, to help, to sacrifice something unnamed but important. That space was unsettling. A week later, Dad showed up again. No realtor this time. No paperwork. Just him, standing on my porch with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking older than I remembered. I won't come in, he said quickly, sensing my hesitation. I just wanted to talk. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. He looked past me toward the backyard. Rachel's having a hard time. I know, I replied. She thinks you don't care about her kids. That's not true. Then why won't you help? I took a breath. Because helping shouldn't mean giving up my life. Dad shook his head slowly. You're choosing a house over family. No, I said. I'm choosing myself for once. The words surprised both of us. He studied my face like he was searching for the daughter who used to comply. Your mother wouldn't have wanted this. That one hurt. He knew it would. I think Mom would have wanted me to be treated fairly, I said. He didn't argue, he just nodded once and left. That night, Rachel texted me for the first time since mediation. I hope you're happy. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I hope you find what you need. She didn't reply. Weeks passed. Then months. I heard updates through extended family. Rachel found a larger rental near a park. The twins were enrolled in preschool. Dad helped cover some of the cost. Life went on without my involvement, and that realization was both relieving and painful. What I hadn't expected was the backlash outside my family. A neighbor mentioned, casually, that my dad had been telling people I turned my back on family. Another asked if I was moving soon. Rumors travel fast in quiet neighborhoods. For a moment, I considered selling the house just to escape the narrative. But then I remembered why I stayed. One evening, as I sat on the back steps watching the sun dip behind the fence, Janice called. Just checking in, she said. Any further contact from them? No, I replied. That's good. Means they've accepted reality, I laughed softly. Or they're regrouping. Either way, she said. You did the right thing. After the call ended, I realized something important. I hadn't once doubted my decision. That was new. Growing up, doubt had been constant. Doubt about my feelings. Doubt about my boundaries. Doubt about whether I was allowed to say no. That doubt was gone. In its place was something steadier. Confidence, maybe. Or self-respect. One Saturday afternoon, my aunt stopped by unannounced. She brought iced tea and the familiar tone of someone here to mediate. You know your father is proud of you, she said. I raised an eyebrow. That's not what he's been telling people, she sighed. He doesn't know how to admit he was wrong. I'm not asking him to, I replied. I just want him to stop trying to control me. She nodded like that was a reasonable request. After she left, I realized how much energy I'd spent my life managing other people's emotions, anticipating reactions, adjusting myself to avoid conflict. Standing my ground had been terrifying. But it had also been freeing. That night changed everything. I thought again, remembering the realtor in my yard. The audacity of it still shocked me. But without that moment, I might never have seen the pattern clearly. I might still be bending. As summer approached, I hosted a small gathering. Friends from work, neighbors I trusted. Laughter filled the yard. Someone complimented the roses. You've made this place yours, a coworker said. I really have, I replied. Later, alone, I realized something else. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I wasn't hoping for validation. I had moved past the need to be chosen. And that realization, quiet and steady, felt like the beginning of something better. Fall arrived slowly that year, like it was unsure whether it was welcome. The leaves in my backyard shifted from green to yellow, one hesitant patch at a time, and the air carried that familiar crispness that always made me reflective. I spent more evenings outside, wrapped in a sweater, listening to the neighborhood settle into quiet. It was during one of those evenings that my dad came back. I heard his truck before I saw it. The familiar engine noise stirred something instinctive in my chest, a mix of tension and old habit. I didn't rush to the door this time. I watched from the window as he parked neatly along the curb. No crooked angles, no impatience. When I finally opened the door, he didn't try to step inside. I just wanted to talk, he said, his voice lower than usual. I nodded and stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. We stood there for a moment, neither of us speaking, the space between us filled with things we hadn't said for decades. You were right, he finally admitted. The words felt unreal. My father had never been good at saying them. I crossed a line, he continued. I thought I knew what was best. I didn't. I searched his face, looking for defensiveness, for conditions. I found none. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said quickly, as if sensing my hesitation. I just didn't want things to end the way they were. Something in my chest loosened. I never wanted to cut you out, I said. I just needed you to see me as an adult. He nodded slowly. I should have done that a long time ago. We didn't hug. Not yet, but when he left it felt different, lighter. Rachel didn't reach out right away. Weeks passed, then another message appeared on my phone. This one was longer. She wrote about exhaustion, about guilt, about feeling like she failed as a parent and a sister. She admitted she'd assumed I would always make room for her needs because I always had. I didn't realize how much that cost you, she wrote. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I needed you to see me too, I typed. She sent a simple response. I'm trying, that was enough. We met for coffee a few weeks later, neutral territory, no kids, no dad. Just us. She looked tired but calmer. Older, somehow. I was angry, she admitted. At everything, at you, at myself. I know, I said. I shouldn't have let Dad speak for me, she added. I appreciated that more than she probably knew. We didn't fix everything in that conversation. But we laid something down between us that hadn't existed before. Honesty. As winter crept in, my backyard changed again. The roses went dormant. The grass thinned, but it still felt like mine. A place that held memory and meaning instead of obligation. One afternoon, Janice called again. Just closing the loop, she said. No further action from your family. Everything's resolved. Thank you, I replied. For everything. You stood up for yourself, she said. I just made sure the law backed you up. After the call, I realized something else had shifted. I wasn't defensive anymore. I didn't feel the need to justify my choices. The fear that once followed every boundary was gone. During the holidays, Dad came over for dinner, just him. He brought a pie. We ate quietly, talking about neutral things at first. Work, weather, the twins' latest obsession with dinosaurs. Before he left, he paused at the back door. You've built something good here, he said. I see that now. I nodded. It took time. After he drove away, I stood in the kitchen for a while, listening to the house settle. The silence felt earned. For years, I believed being a good daughter meant shrinking, giving, making myself smaller so others could feel comfortable. Now I understood something different. Love that requires erasure isn't love at all. That night changed everything. I thought again, but this time without bitterness. That moment had forced a reckoning. One I didn't ask for, but one I needed. As the year came to a close, I sat in my backyard one last time before winter fully claimed it. The yard was quiet, bare, honest, and for the first time, I felt completely at home. Winter settled in quietly that year, coating the neighborhood in frost and soft silence. My backyard looked entirely different: barren trees, a thin layer of snow on the grass, the roses tucked in for the season, but it still felt like mine. A place I had fought for, not just with contracts or lawyers, but with the hard work of standing up for myself. I remember sitting on the back steps, wrapped in a thick blanket, watching the sunlight glint off the icy fence. I thought about everything that had happened since that Saturday when Dad had brought the Realtor to my yard. The tension, the anger, the feeling of betrayal. All the late-night conversations with myself about whether I was being selfish. I realized now that moment had started a shift in my life I hadn't anticipated. Rachel had called earlier that week. A short, hesitant message: the boys are doing well, thanks for respecting my space too. I smiled, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure what to write. Then I typed, glad to hear that. We're both figuring this out. No drama, no blame, just acknowledgement. And it felt like progress. I thought about Dad, the man who had stood in my yard like he had the right to decide what I could or couldn't to do. He had come back that fall quietly, with no demands, no expectations, just an acknowledgement of his mistakes. That, too, felt like a gift. It wasn't perfection, but it was honesty. And it was enough. For months, the twins grew taller and louder. Rachel would send occasional pictures. The boys running around a park she had finally found, one with enough space to let them stretch, laugh, and be kids. It wasn't my responsibility to fix her life. It never had been. But that didn't mean I didn't care. The difference was in the boundaries I had finally learned to honor. That realization hit me one cold evening when I was raking leaves in the backyard. My hands were raw, my back aching, and the wind cut through my sweater. Normally, I would have imagined Rachel calling, asking for help, or Dad offering advice, but I didn't feel anxious. I felt grounded. I was taking care of my life, my house, my space, and no one could dictate otherwise. It occurred to me then how often we confuse family obligation with personal sacrifice. How easy it is to allow someone else's needs to outweigh your own, to believe that refusing is selfish. I'd spent decades believing that, trying to be the good daughter, the helpful sister. But in the end, being present and being fair to myself didn't make me unloving. It made me whole. Over the next few weeks, I focused on improvements I'd postponed. I planted winter-hardy shrubs along the fence line, fixed the loose gate hinge, and finally built that small bench I had sketched out months ago. Every action felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a statement that I could care, nurture, and grow without surrendering to demands that didn't belong to me. Dad came by again just before Christmas. This time, we talked about neutral things: the neighbor's new puppy, the snowfall, the grocery store that had reopened after renovations. He didn't mention the yard, the twins, or his past insistence, and for once I didn't feel ignored. I felt seen not as a daughter who needed to comply, but as a woman capable of making her own decisions. Rachel sent a message on Christmas morning. "Happy holidays, Emily. Thank you for giving us the space we needed." I typed back, "Happy holidays to you too. Wishing you all happiness this year. No guilt, no resentment. Just sincerity." That, I realized, was what family could look like without coercion. Sitting in the quiet of my living room that night, surrounded by the faint scent of pine and baking spices, I reflected on the journey. Standing up to my family hadn't been easy. There had been nights filled with tears, moments where self-doubt clawed at me, and mornings when I felt guilty for thinking of my own needs first. But it had been necessary. The lesson wasn't about resentment or victory. It was about respect, clarity, and honesty. I looked around my house. The backyard, now bare and waiting for spring, still held memories of roses and laughter. I realized that home isn't just walls and land. Home is the space where you are allowed to exist fully, where your choices are acknowledged, and where your voice matters. I had claimed that space, not for anyone else but for myself. As I watched the sun dip below the frosted fence line, I felt a quiet pride. Not in the house, not in the roses, not in the disputes, but in the strength it took to assert my boundaries, to face my family without fear, and to do it with grace. I had learned that family isn't defined by control or obligation. It's defined by love, yes, but also by respect, honesty, and the freedom to be yourself. That day, I understood fully. Love that asks you to erase yourself isn't love at all. And saying no doesn't make you cruel. It makes you human. It makes you free. Family should be about support, not control. About empathy, not entitlement. And I finally understood what it means to be respected as an individual, even by the people who shaped your early life. I went to bed that night feeling an unfamiliar sense of completion. The conflict, the tension, the fear all had served a purpose. They had forced growth. They had forced me to recognize my worth. And in doing so, they had gifted me the peace I hadn't realized I was missing. Standing in the quiet of my backyard, the snow crunching under my boots, as I made one last check of the rose bush, I smiled softly. For the first time, I felt fully at home, not just in a house, but in my life, in my choices, and in the way I had learned to love and protect myself. And that, I knew, was the true gift of family.